Hi guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command. And we're going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 3 of Star Trek Discovery, Point of Light. And also mentioning about Space Command a little bit. I met with Nichelle Nichols and her team yesterday. We're talking about shooting a scene with her for Space Command, and it's very exciting. And we may be telling you more about that very shortly. Probably do a little GoFundMe campaign to fund some of the shooting we want to do. Lots to talk about. But in the meantime, here's my thought about the third episode of Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. You know, I keep waiting for it to get good, and it's, I don't know. I think the problem I have is, with the original Star Trek and with Star Trek The Next Generation and DS9 and even Voyager, there were characters that you liked, that you cared about. There were friendships between the characters that you believed. There was a emotional buy-in, and they were very vivid characters. I mean, Data and Worf and Picard and Kirk, Spock, McCoy and the holographic Doctor and all of these characters that we really enjoyed watching, and and we're basically felt affection toward them. And with Star Trek Discovery, Doug Jones, who's a wonderful human being, you get a sense of his humanity, and the character is brave and intelligent and compassionate, and so that character you do buy into. I think he's the most interesting character and the best character in the show. But many of the other characters, there's a kind of a frostiness, a friction between them, or when they pretend to be friends, it just feels, it just doesn't ring true. It doesn't. It's like writing about something rather than actually dramatizing it, so you go through the emotional experience of it. And again, this is just my opinion. If you love Star Trek Discovery, great. If you don't love it, well, there's a lot of other shows on the air. But let's just go into this episode a little bit. There were 3 plot lines. One in which Spock has gone missing, and he was in a mental institution, and he's escaped, and he killed some people allegedly, and it's because he has no empathy, and that's a sign of a psychopath, and we have to find him and save him, and it may be because of something that Michael did to him in the past, etc. It's very plot stuff. And and then Spock's mother shows up, and it's not Jane Wyatt because she's not with us anymore. But there's a huge difference between the actress they cast. First of all, Elaine was watching the show with me and doesn't want to watch any more Star Trek Discovery. But when this actress showed up, Elaine said, well, why is Spock's mother younger than Michael? And, because she seems kind of girlish, even though she's not. And, but this points to something that's, and again, it's not necessarily fair to compare Star Trek Discovery to other versions of Star Trek. And, I keep trying to think of what I would think of this show if I were 10 or 15, if I was a kid, would I cue into it? And I really don't know the answer. But I do know that in the original Star Trek, Jane Wyatt and Mark Lenard played Spock's parents. And even though Mark Lenard wasn't that much older than Leonard Nimoy, may not have even been older, he had a gravitas and a dignity and a quality where you believed that he would be an ambassador. And Jane Wyatt, who of course was Hollywood royalty, she had starred opposite Ronald Colman in Lost Horizon, which if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's a great movie. And she'd also been Robert Young's wife in the long-running TV show Father Knows Best. So she was a very known and admired and liked actress. And she had, again, a quality of aristocracy and intelligence, and she was just great as his mother, both in the TV show and in the movies. And she just seemed like she would be a diplomat's wife. It suited her in terms of how she came across, whereas the actress they've cast to play Spock's mother now has none of that bearing and none of that manner. And you just really don't believe that she's a diplomat's wife. She doesn't seem to have that quality, nor does Sarek seem like a diplomat. And again, this is my opinion, but then it's like, well, we have to go find Spock, and Spock's mother says, I'll go find him. Okay, go do it. And then we have Tilly, who's after she gets zapped by the dark matter, she's seeing a grown version of a dead school friend, and who seems very odd and definitely seems like an alien, not like a real human being. And Tilly's training for the captaincy, or to ultimately be a captain. And again, they've laid this thread in, but she never seems to do anything that actually shows why she would make a good captain. Everyone is saying you'd be a great captain, but she's just kind of dithery and hysterical. And yes, she comes up with solutions sometimes, but it's just kind of odd. She doesn't have command. She doesn't seem to have that headset. And when she's, going through the training thing, instead of saying, hey, I'm seeing this apparition after I got zapped by dark matter, which you think that almost any sane person would say, because after all, you're in an alien section of space, you've got this weird thing happening. I mean, maybe it's time to tell people, particularly after all the apparitions and other things that have happened throughout the first season, all the weirdnesses. And this goes back to a plot device that goes all the way back to, well, the beginning of time, no doubt. But it was very pronounced in Astaire Rogers musicals, where Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers starred in a series of musical films where they were romantically inclined, and there would always come a point in their movies where there would be a misunderstanding, and rather than talking to each other and clearing it up instantly, they would become angry with each other, and then they'd fall apart, and then they'd come back together. And you always said, well, why don't they just talk to each other? And in this episode of Star Trek, you felt that way too, because sort of like, why doesn't Tilly just say she's going through something? Why does she have to act out and blah, 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 blah? Because it's the plot. The plot is telling her to do this. The plot is this twist and this turn, but not a real emotional line. And, and then, of course, they draw that it's a fungus that's invaded her, and they draw it out, and then it's kind of malevolent. But sort of like, well, maybe they could have talked to it. Maybe they could have found out what it wanted. It clearly wanted something. Maybe they could have, it didn't seem very Star Trek to just say, well, this is going to hurt, and we're going to try and destroy this creature, and pull her out of you. And it's like, okay, more plot stuff. And then, finally, the third storyline was Vaak, the Klingon, and at least in this episode they established that it actually is Vaak, who's been altered to look like a human. So, and again, it's, so it isn't a human who's been brainwashed. He's actually a Klingon. Okay. And then and he's supposed to be the leader or subordinate to the female leader, and there's a lot of stuff going on. It's just like, well, where's all this going? And again, if you remember the Star Trek TV show, there were Klingons who looked like human beings. And so again, it's not dovetailing to the mythology very well. It just seems like very funky, and they communicate via holograms and so forth. And again, this is very different from what Star Trek, the original series, the technology that it laid down. And so, and then ultimately Vaak and the the Emperor / former captain of Discovery shows up. She's the mirror image person, and she's a monster. But for some reason, people are actually listening to her advice, and it's like, okay. So, and again, it's sort of like, well, who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy? Those lines are blurred in this show. And now she's the head of the, she's in the intelligence covert ops, part of the Federation and of Starfleet. It's like, okay, but she's like a villain. It's like, why are we? And they're going to have a show around her now. And, Michelle Yeoh, she's very distinctive, of course, but boy, I wish the other character, the captain from our universe, was the one who survived, because she was actually heroic. But anyway, so then it's and then with Vaak, it's like, there's a Klingon baby, and it's and it's a really rubbery looking prop, and and again, and does Vaak still care about Michael? Does he care about the Klingon woman? And it's okay. It's okay. Stuff happens, but again, it's sort of like, well, I don't know. I'm just not engaged in this, and I'm not finding these characters interesting. And so that's just me. But anyway, so that's all of it. So for me, it's just like twists and turns and twists and turns and twists and turns. But, we'll see. I mean, in terms of Space Command, I've tried in my own way to create characters who connect with each other, and they act out of compassion. And you get a sense of what their dreams are and their past is and who they are in their heart. And it's a subtlety, and it's a personal taste thing. If you love Discovery, I have no problem with that. But for me, I just keep waiting for it to rise to the challenge. And for me, it's just kind of like, okay, this is not doing what I'd like it to do. So anyway, so that's about it for now. Marc Zicree of Space Command, Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi. We're going to be doing the history of science fiction film very soon. Additionally, you can contribute to Mr. Sci-Fi via the Marc Zicree Patreon page. We're also going to be doing some crowdfunding in the near future to shoot more of Space Command. Lots of stuff coming. So, and if you haven't seen the pilot, the hour of Space Command, it's here on Mr. Sci-Fi. You can watch it. We're going to hit 100,000 views very soon, and I want to get up to 1 million. And that's about it. Talk to you again soon, and it's a rainy day here in California. Talk to you again. Bye-bye.